All right.
How you doing, Ola?
Pretty good. Busy, overwhelmed, lots of
Lots of things going on.
lots of projects and things going on. What about you?
You know, I think we're gonna get into it a little bit as part of this episode. So I guess we'll introduce the topic and chat about it more in depth. But we're in episode 6. We're in episode 6 now.
Something like that.
Yeah. How quick was that?
They're timeless episode.
Episode whatever.
Yeah.
Hopefully this information, is useful to whoever, whenever. So, but this is our 6th session, anyways, recording. So we're getting a bit better at having these conversations and things like that. So it's exciting time for us, I think. But the topic for today, we're going to be talking about layoffs.
Yeah, navigating layoffs.
It's part of the tech world. It's part of careers in general. It's very timely for myself, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But it's a very common thing at this time. Now, depending on when you're listening, maybe it won't even be relevant anymore, and things are like back on the upswing, and finding the right talent is the big issue. Because I remember that was actually a problem a couple of years ago. Is everybody was like, I've got cash, I need good people to work at the company. But when the reverse of that happens, then you don't have that cash flow that you need. You actually need to be a lean company. And what that can mean for people is that, you have to downsize. Maybe you grew too much too quickly. You can't actually realize what it is that you had invested the money in towards.
Yeah.
And that leads to things like layoffs. So at this time, actually, maybe I'll timestamp it so you know the climate that we're in at the moment as part of like the tech world. So it's March 2023.
Yeah.
Last week, we actually had a featured guest, and we talked to them about SVB. So the whole SVB situation, Silicon Valley Bank, that happened basically last week, within the last 10 days. And so the tech world is still kind of struggling coming out of that. But even before that, there was a lot of things that had kind of put some of these situations in motion. One big thing is the general rate, like the increased rate for borrowing money. Just as a quick aside, I don't want to go too much into financials for a company, but typically when borrowing rates are really low, you borrow a lot so that you can invest in the future and make that money back somehow. But when rates are really high, it makes that decision to borrow way more difficult, makes it harder for you to get that money. And usually companies have to downsize. And that's the situation we're in right now. A lot of companies downsizing. And I mean, have you experienced this in your place where there needed to be way more efficient, the year of efficiency, as Mark Zuckerberg called it?
I will. Definition of it's literally what layoffs are about. It's to make companies, in quotes, more efficient.
Yeah, lean. They want them to be lean.
Yeah.
In certain situations. And you just go back to kind of like your core activities. For my company, so full disclosure, I got laid off very recently. For my company, the situation was...
When he says recently, that was literally last night.
Yeah, yesterday. Actually, yesterday morning.
Okay.
So very, very recently. But we had a wave of layoffs before that as well. And then some more layoffs after. And then now this big wave. So the first time it was like maybe 15% of the company was laid off.
Yeah.
And then the second time before this one, I think maybe 10 people got laid off, which is smaller than the 15%.
What's the total number of people that work at the company?
Now it's probably like 90.
So before the layoffs started?
Before all of these layoffs, we were probably at like 140 something.
And now 90. Oh, wow.
Yeah. So in about 2 quarters.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So quite a drastic decrease. So they went through an expansion phase, which is when I was hired on about a year ago, where things were like borrowing rates were close to zero. So if you had an idea and you wanted to figure it out, you borrowed money and you went and tried to figure it out. It was very cheap for you to borrow money. And so there was like at the time, and also not just borrowing money, I keep mentioning that, but also raising money is the same thing. Like when the market is booming, borrowing rates are low, people spend more, therefore there's more opportunities for you to make money in the market. That's where they kind of were when I was hired on.
Why were they borrowing money though? Like what was it for?
To invest in new products that they wanted to develop and also to market the products.
So they were more
already
eager
had.
to grow.
They were more eager to grow. That was
Yeah.
the big focus was growth.
Okay.
And when the situation changes, your focus just becomes actually profiting. So
Right.
like early on, you don't really care about profit as much. You might have heard of like growth tech startups, like Uber famously did not make money for a very long time. I think very recently they became profitable. Like they had a profitable quarter, but like that's after a really long time of running. And so you're in that growth phase, and the investors also expect you not to make that much money. Like you're trying to just get a big user base, or I come from product, so I'm always thinking in terms of users. But maybe you're trying to get a lot of like purchases, if like that's what you sell is like an actual physical product or something like that. You're trying to maximize that and get it in as many hands as possible, and you don't care as much what it's costing you to do that. So
Yeah.
some companies actually, like in tech, very early companies will typically run at a deficit where they're spending more money than they're making. But in order to do that, you need investors and you need access to money. And that's where I keep talking about like borrowing and things like that.
Yeah.
Because they enable your growth phase.
When I actually had my startup, like the investors we talked to used to tell us not to talk about any profit if we any revenue if we started.
Yeah.
Because no matter what number you mention,
Yeah.
that then sets the expectation for how fast your company is growing in terms of revenue, and then we were told at the time that it just hurts you.
Yeah, and early on, you honestly maybe shouldn't even be as focused on that. You want to prove that you've got like the number one objective for early companies is to get product market fit,
Right.
and to do that, you need to spend a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of money, in order to figure that out. But once you've figured it out, this is the product, this is the market that you're selling it to, then you can start to kind of focus on, can this be a sustainable long-term business? But like early on, your objective is to try and figure that out.
Product market fit, PMF.
Yeah, and it's going to cost you. So we were in that situation essentially like a year ago when I joined. It was like, okay, we have this thing, we think it might work, we need to figure out product market fit at all costs, essentially.
Yeah.
So
I guess,
we hired a lot of
before
people.
we continue, just to give people the expectation.
Yeah.
So we say what happened, what, like in your case, what happened, which is what we're talking about right now.
Yeah.
And then we mentioned how, why layoffs happen in general.
Yeah.
And, how to feel about it and how to, I guess, prepare yourself mentally for it, because it can happen to anyone.
Yeah, and that's like part of the reason why I'm talking about the different phases a company goes through, is so that it'll help you frame what's happening while it's happening.
Yeah.
Because and it's very difficult because like when you get laid off, it's very difficult for it to not feel like a rejection, even though in reality it might not be that. It's not like that personal. It's like it's a business decision. It's like a numbers decision. But it can make you feel a particular type of way. So I think it's really important to understand the context of why a company is like in a big hiring phase,
right?
Or why a company could be at a slim down, get lean phase.
All right.
And it's impossible to aim just right. Like if you're picturing it like a graph of like company revenue growth and then like number of employees at the bottom, you'd expect that line to just be like a straight line up and to the right. So the more employees that you have, the more revenue that you're getting, and the company's in balance. But in reality, it's like a wave of back and forth through that straight line.
Right.
So when you're in like the growth phase, you're probably going to overhire.
Right.
And then you're going to realize, we're not making enough money with the people that we have, we need to downsize.
Mm-hmm.
Then you probably over downsize, which I suspect is the case with a lot of companies. I don't know if it'll be the case for like my situation specifically, but for like recently, that what's been in the big tech news is like Facebook's layoffs, for example.
Right.
They're downsizing a huge amount, like in the thousands, and maybe in the tens of thousands, people have been laid off. But what that'll do is it'll make it so the company is running with less people than it needs to actually run, which will actually increase their profit margins, which will allow them to experiment again, and so they'll hire again, and so you'll overshoot. And then you undershoot, overshoot, and you keep doing that, I don't know, probably forever until you're a really, really big steady state company like Coke or something where you can actually figure, exactly what you need. So we were in a stage where we've kind of overshot. We hired way too many people in the year that I came on, I think like maybe close to 30 other people came on at the same time. And then we realized, we're actually not making as much money. The whole situation also happened with basically a downturn. We've got the situation with inflation. People are raising interest rates. People don't want to spend as much money. We're a B2B company.
Business to business.
So you require other businesses to also have money in order to
and
buy
they're struggling
from you.
right now.
And everybody's struggling, so everybody's more conscious of where their money is going. And so it makes your revenues go down.
What's an example of like your customer base? Like
our customer base
businesses?
Was a lot of startups.
Okay.
So like my company, the job was to protect intellectual property and data of other businesses through like cloud platforms and things like that.
Okay, the reason why I ask is because that gives context, because startups right now are struggling to raise money, they're struggling to make money.
Yeah.
So in
IPOs.
A way, it's not your company's fault, because their customer base are just not.
And they were making decisions based on a different market.
Right.
And then when the market downturns, you have to adjust really quickly, or you burn out. Like you will literally run out of money.
Yeah.
Like they talk about a runway for a company, and that's essentially how much time you have until you get to $0. And in a situation where you're not certain about how much additional revenue is going to come in, your run rate is constantly getting shorter every month. And so in order for the company entirely to survive, like you almost have to cut off a limb, like a what's an analogy? Like when an arm has like gangrene or something like that, and you have to cut off a limb in order for the rest of the body to survive. It's like a similar decision that's being made, just where it's not life or death. It's just like a company either makes it or dies.
Yeah.
But yeah, so when in that situation, some companies may be forced to lay you off or whatever, and they lose too, because a lot of talented people end up leaving. Like from my company, there's so many good people who got laid off at the same time I did, and it's not always like a full positive for the company. Like they now will have probably to find replacements for these people when things change around again, because that's what you're hoping, right? Like you don't lay off a bunch of people expecting for the ship to eventually go down. You do it so that you can go back up at some point. And when it's time to do that again, it's like now you gotta search for people. I was listening to another podcast that talked about this a little bit, and some companies in the US, if they have like a lot of money, they will actually like hoard talent even though they don't have enough.
That was what a lot of tech companies were doing before, because it's the more you can keep, the less your competition have.
And you don't have to retrain people.
And hiring takes a while.
Timely,
Depends on
it's
the role.
expensive.
Yeah.
So like in order to avoid that cost in the future, if you've got enough money, like that the runway isn't a big concern. Some people will just hold on to that. Right. But that really depends on the company that you're in, the size. Like mine is pretty small, so the money that's coming in is make or break. Whether or not you can get funds is make or break. But anyways, that's like 13 minutes of context already. So now we're in the situation, and we've talked a lot of it from like the company's perspective, but like as an individual, how do you then deal with a situation like that? And that's something that I'm going through. So for context, I've never been laid off before. I've been in tech for 5 years or something like that, and I've never been in a situation where I was one of the unfortunate ones. I've seen it happen in every company that I was in. In all 3 companies I worked for, layoffs happen. And when they happen, it's always like a difficult time for the person who got laid off. Obviously, it's a difficult time for the company too, but everybody's like struggling basically at this point. And it can lead to a lot of despair. And I've seen it in like other people who have been laid off. I saw it myself yesterday when I got laid off. So it's like a moment where you're like really, really uncertain, especially with all of the other things that are going on contextually, like around, that are even causing layoffs to happen.
Yeah.
It can cause you to be a little bit stressed out in the situation. But I think the important thing, which you mentioned to me as well when you found out the news, is like not every like negative thing that's happening or perceivably negative thing actually ends up being a negative thing in the long run. Like we talked about it a little bit even in the journey to Canada.
Right.
episode, like sometimes you get rejected in order for you to be like pushed into a path that's a little bit better for you
Yeah,
in the end.
life gives you forcing functions.
It gives you a forcing
And
function.
forcing function is something that forces you to do something else.
You gotta make a move at that point. So like, if it's maybe even something that you were considering, but you're like comfortable where you were, a situation like this can actually shake things up for you enough so that you are then forced to think of a new solution and, to go and implement it, which is something that I've kind of been realizing in the last 2 days. So it's like the middle of the week. We record these on Wednesdays. So like right now we're recording on a Wednesday.
Yeah.
This happened on a Tuesday. So I've had 2 full days in the middle of the week.
Tuesday. This is Wednesday. So
yeah, so
not up to 2 full days. That's like
1.5 days.
Yeah, over 24 hours.
But I'm considering like 2 work days.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah.
So I've had 2 8-hour periods where I should have been at work, but I wasn't. And just the flexibility of having that time back.
Yeah.
Aside from not making any money in that time.
Yeah.
It was like a revelation for me. Because both days were beautiful. That's one thing. So we live in Vancouver. It's like springtime. The sun is finally starting to come out now.
Yeah.
But not being forced to be at the office at that time allowed me to think, what if you could just like live like that and go and pursue whatever it is you need to do whenever you needed to do it. But you still made that money. Like the part is like you still need to make that money to survive, to do whatever it is that you need to do. So what if you could make both things happen? And a situation like this allows you to consider that as a possibility as well. So that's something that I've been kind of wrestling with the last few days, is like, how can you make this existence a reality, but also be making that baseline income or whatever it is that you need to make, working on whatever creative ideas. Like we basically, we have extra energy, which is why we're sitting here doing a podcast, you know?
Yeah.
But some people at the end of the day, it's just like, that's it, we're done. We did what we needed to do that day. We can relax and go watch something or whatever. But imagine you had all of the time to create like that. And so as a creative person, it gives me a lot of optimism to be able to try and figure out that this whole situation, but then hold on to that level of freedom and be able to kind of do more creative endeavors like this, collaborate with way more people, get out a little bit more. So I've gone through like a roller coaster where I was like, oh no, this happened. What do we do now? And then a realization that, okay, if you can figure the situation out and you can actually like, you know, make your obligations and all of this could actually be an excellent thing for you, as long as you kind of can flip it into something more like impactful or positive for you as well. So for me, I've gone through what some people have gone through, like the despair situation, but even like a year after, I've seen so many people who had been laid off land on their feet, whether they're working for somebody else or a different company, or they're working for themselves now. They've come out better on the other side. Like, they're happy about it. You know, it was obviously devastating at the time. Short term is like a lot of pain, but long term, like the vast majority have gotten a gain out of a situation like this. So that's something else that I'm trying to keep in the back of my mind, is like, when a situation like this happens, allow yourself to feel whatever it is that you're going to feel, but then afterwards realize that this is just like a short-term situation, and take it for the opportunity that it is. You can now reinvent yourself in however you want. And for some people, that means going to work for a different company in the same industry, or maybe not even working in tech completely and changing out where they're going to work, or maybe not even working for anybody at all and going on an entrepreneurship journey or something like that. Take these opportunities, because like when you're in a career and you're in the place of work, your goal becomes to do really well there and to do really well at your position, and you know, and that's where most of your energy goes towards.
Right.
But what if you put your energy towards something else that could have that could go really well as well, regardless of like where it is and regardless of who you are. So yeah, that's kind of the emotional journey that I went on, and the mindset that I have now is, okay, this has happened. What can you do to shift the situation so you're not like destitute or anything? Mm-hmm. And then now that you've got like the time freedom to do stuff, what do you truly want to do? And so like for the first time, I can like I have a lot of time to think about that specifically.
Yeah.
It's like, what do you actually want to spend? Like, what does your day look like ideally, if that's what you're doing? And now I've got to just make that a reality.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, you know, it's easier on the outside to say how it's supposed to feel or how it should be, but you don't know until you go through it.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to pretend like I do.
Yeah.
So, you know what I mean? My perspective is from looking at my colleagues, my close friends, who we had all these ideas, all these plans of what we will work on for the next quarter.
Yeah.
And then literally 4 hours later, you find out that they were laid off. For context, the company I work at as well, a bunch of people got laid off like 4 months ago.
Yeah.
And it's a horrible feeling. And that was for me looking from the outside, not the people that were laid off.
Yeah.
But, you know, I tweeted about this a while ago, but, you know, every failure, in this case, this is not a failure on your part, but every failure leaves behind like spare parts for future successes. Yeah. So for context, we don't always talk about the topics that we want to talk about until like the day off. Yeah. And for this one, it was literally just not too long ago, like 30 minutes ago maybe, that I mentioned to Mark that we should, you know, talk about this layoff. It's still fresh. Yeah. So, you know, it could go two ways. It could be too emotional and we end up just not putting it out. Yeah. Or it's a way for people to be able to connect to something like this. Yeah. As it's fresh, because turning shit into sugar. Yeah.
Yeah, turning into just like a situation you were not expecting into something that could be really, really good. And the thing is, like, there's always so much potential, and I'm almost like a potential addict. Yeah. I really love having multiple paths forward, knowing that any one of them could lead to something absolutely amazing. And optionality is like it's like a vice for me. It can be really good because it keeps me open-minded, but then it can sometimes be bad because it can stagnate you a bit when you've got too many options and you don't take any of them. Right. And then you end up not doing anything. So like my situation, my key is like figure out a few key lanes that you really want to go for and then like focus my energy specifically on those things. But to do with the point that you were mentioning before, like whether or not this episode was going to go this way or that. The number one thing that I hope to get across with this episode is that it gets better. Even like it's really all a mindset shift. Like as it's happening, depending on your situation as well. And I honestly don't want to speak for everybody. Like there's some people who are the sole breadwinner in a family where they've got kids and stuff to worry about. Listening to this podcast, they might be like, what are these people talking about? Like opportunity, like I gotta figure out how to feed my kids tonight, it's totally different. It depends on your situation, of course. In my situation, I'm kind of lucky that this happened at a time where I don't have that many obligations or that many dependencies, so I can use it as an opportunity to be like creative and free. But I'm sympathetic as well to the situations that other people can kind of go through. Like if you're gonna be taking, like if this is like a massive blow to your ability to like provide, I'm sure that is devastating. But what's true for both people in both scenarios, like myself or somebody with dependence, is that you now have more option vectors at the moment. You can take this situation for what it is, which is like a devastation, or you can take it for what it is, which is an opportunity. And the decision between those two things, which are both true, by the way, is how you approach it and like your mindset about it. And that's the thing that I'm trying to stay very, very like focused on, is like this can be whatever you make it. Just try and make it gold, as you mentioned. Like turn the shit into gold as much as possible. And that's the number one message that I'm hoping to get across in this episode, is take a situation for what it is, allow yourself to dwell a little bit, but then think beyond it and like think longer term. Like perhaps this is putting you on a much better path, depending, you know.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. It's just usually harder for some people or many people to get to that stage of seeing things from that perspective. Yeah. So I think the first step is, feel the pain, feel what they need to feel. And that's where the gold is.
Yeah.
The gold is not you don't necessarily get the gold from looking at things objectively.
Yeah.
Use that pain as fuel.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? To do what you need to do. Yeah. Like if you are going to use that to be passionate, I think I mentioned that in one earlier episode about how getting rejected from jobs in bank allowed me to have the confidence to start my own company, which led me to career in tech.
Yeah.
And I think for me in that moment, I didn't try to skip the anger I was feeling.
Yeah.
I took that anger, and that was what made me start drawing mock-ups. I could not draw. I didn't know anything about creating any product.
Yeah.
But it was just the anger. Like I never want to feel as rejected as I felt in that moment. And I think that's what people should, dwell in it. If you're mad, you don't care about capitalism. Yeah. Good. Use that opportunity to spend time with your loved ones, your family.
Yeah.
Pick up some. If you want to start gardening, or just use that time to do you.
Yeah.
And because you will bounce back. And the reason you will bounce back is it had nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
It's not because you're not a good worker.
Yeah.
I was lucky, when the layoffs happened, we were given the reason.
Yeah.
Like it has nothing to do with anyone's ability. It's like a soccer team.
Yeah.
When each season, each coach makes the best choice based on the squad they're given to win for that season.
Yeah.
You could be the best player, but the club, all of a sudden, if the club needs 5 more, let's say you're the best striker, but the club only needs 1 decent striker, and they need 5 more defenders, they will sell you so that they can buy the 5 defenders. It doesn't mean you're now not a good player.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
And soccer players don't then look at themselves like, oh, I'm a failure. Technically, it's a layoff. They look at it like, well, it's just not the need of the team right now.
That's not what's needed at the moment.
Yeah, so they take that part, they take their skill and go somewhere else. And each season, each team has to make that decision. So in a layoff, that's what companies are doing. They look at the pieces, they're like, okay, this is a superstar. However, we don't need a superstar right now. Right now, we just need to survive. We need 4 people to take all these support calls because we're churning customers so bad.
100%.
And but a company would not tell you that when they're laying you off because that creates some legal issues for a company. They can't say, oh, you're amazing, we're letting you go. Because if they say that, it's like, okay, if I'm so amazing, why are you letting me go?
Yeah,
so
there's things like wrongful termination suits they got to worry about.
So I have friends in HR, and that's what they said. They won't tell you.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. To be honest, they were pretty good about that in terms of like communicating that across the people. From at least what I experienced, they were very clear about performance not being like the big issue individually. Anyways, it was performance for the whole company. That was the issue. That's the situation, not necessarily individual performance. And you invest in different areas of the business depending on what's needed. Just like you mentioned in the soccer analogy. If you're a company that is experimenting with maybe like 3 different approaches, one works, another one you think could work, and then a third one that is a long shot. When you're flush and things are going really, really well with like the first system, say, is like bringing in a lot of cash, you now have excess that you can explore other ways with, and you kind of need those other ways in order to take your company to the next level. But when your priority is literally just survive as a company, you're going to cut off the experimental things and focus on maintaining what's been working and make it go as far. So that's another really big point, I guess, to take from this situation. If you've been affected by like mass layoffs or something like that, it's not a personal thing. It doesn't mean like your skill set isn't good. It just means that your skill set at that moment is not the most critical for that business.
Right.
But it could be super critical for another business. So
exactly.
So it's like, if you want to work for another business as a result of a situation like this, just like keep a positive mind frame that other places require the skill set, because this company needed that at one point, right?
It's also not always performance to keep in mind. Like in the case of ours, things were actually going well.
Yeah.
It's just the change in dynamic. So like
what do you mean by that?
Yeah?
What do you mean by that?
Like we are doing well, however, if we continue down the path that we're going, in 6 months we won't do well.
Yeah.
So we had to change formation. Yeah. So it's almost like a forward thinking, which it's hard to understand. And I'm saying this for people who are high performers, and then they're working in a company where, oh wait, last month I thought we had the most profitable quarter as a company. Layoffs can still happen in situations like that.
That's true,
because the leadership is looking at, we are doing fine now, but
what
in
about
6 months from now, is this where we need to go? So then they try to shape the company in the way that works for the current reality. So layoffs are very tricky. It's never the same for every company, and it's never personal. It's just always, it's business, unfortunately.
It's business, and it's got to be done, man.
Yeah, and also as an employee, you have to always look at it that way as well. You know, I'm someone who, I'm more of a missionary than a mercenary. Wherever I work, I want to do my best. I want to, you know, I want the company's mission to be my mission, and also make things happen. But this old layoff in the tech industry has made me realize, you know, ultimately do what you can for the business, but also always keep an eye out for your own career. Don't develop yourself in a way that is tailor-made for just one company.
You know, I agree.
Grow yourself outside of just the industry your company is in. Look at things from a very long-term picture. Like, if I were to leave this company right now, will this skill be relevant in any other company? And I think,
And something along those lines as well, you made me think of like some actionable things for maybe people who are not laid off. Like, somebody could be listening to this and they're laid off, and this could be words of encouragement. But like, for somebody who's not laid off and they're worried that it could happen to them, like what do you do and to avoid a situation like that, or to be better prepared for a situation like that? Number one, I will say on the avoid thing, very, very difficult. Like, it really just depends on the function that you play in a company and whether or not the company needs that. So like, that's the part where you cannot take it as personal. But in terms of like posturing yourself so that if it does happen to you, that it goes as smoothly as possible, number one thing I can recommend is network. The strength of your network is so important, and take any opportunity that you can to meet other people in your field, people who are slightly outside of your field but maybe adjacent. But meet as many people as you can, face to face preferably, and develop those relationships. The reason I mentioned that is because part of the reason why I can feel so optimistic only a couple days after the situation happened is, as soon as I like let people know that this has happened, or I posted about it, I've just been flooded with waves of people trying their best to help out. Like, I know of this opportunity over here.
I did see that in your LinkedIn post.
So many people were reaching out, talking about it. Some were commenting on the post. Some people were reaching out in my private messages. And for me, I've got to do some soul searching and figure out exactly what it is that I want to do next. Before, I don't want to, like, you know, when you get burnt, your immediate reaction is to retract your hand and do something really quickly. I don't want to act out of that situation. So like, if a job presents itself, even if it's not like the right fit, you might want to run to that for safety. But that might not necessarily be the right move. So I'm trying to like, just, you know, of course, explore every opportunity that I see, but not necessarily grab onto the first like lifeboat that I can see, you know? So I'm trying to manage that situation as well. But it's better to have too many options than too little. And the options, they come from your network primarily. Like, you can go and apply to a bunch of places, like, but like we've been mentioning before, there's so many layoffs. So like, you got to imagine so many people are also doing the same thing, applying to a bunch of the same positions maybe, and things like that. So like, how do you stand out from a crowd like that? And the number one way that I've known to stand out is to have that person or somebody in a company be like, I know a person who's great fit for this. We should definitely talk to them about that. And that comes from the strength of like your network. And so I would highly recommend, like, if you're in a stable position right now, take a few hours. It doesn't even take that much time, but maybe a few hours every month to find a way to be in front of other, like your peers, to be in front of people maybe in the same age group or the same level in your career, but maybe in a different field, and just get to know them, get to know the problems they're solving, and make them your friends. Be friends with everybody who's kind of around you, and when a situation like that happens, you'll be glad you have so many friends who can kind of help you out.
Yeah, I agree. The counter to that, though, is when something bad happens, retreating is good. And regrouping is good, I should say, but you don't want to hide away.
Yeah.
Because, take the time to reflect and figure out what you need to do next. But once you know, attack right away. Like, go for the next opportunity, go for the next business, whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
Because the longer you take to retreat, the more the self-doubt starts creeping in.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, a layoff that had nothing to do with your ability.
Yeah. Shifts you completely.
Yeah, you start thinking maybe I wasn't good enough.
Yeah.
So you don't want it to ever affect your self-confidence.
Shake your confidence.
Start doing things. Even if you're good at playing video games and you're the best gamer, it's time to start doing that. Start doing things that,
build your confidence.
Build your fire that adds to your flame.
Yeah.
It's not a time for you don't start saying poor me,
Yeah.
It's time to,
Yeah, don't let yourself get to that position. I think it would be number one advice.
Yeah.
Is to not let yourself wallow in pity for too long. Obviously, you're going to feel however you feel, and I already mentioned this earlier, and it's okay. Of course, like, your feelings are valid, and a situation that is not favorable has happened to you. Obviously, that's fine, but don't let it, like, it's okay. You can feel things and not let them change your self-image of yourself, and that's the number one thing I would say is, like, don't let your self-image be tarnished as a result of something that doesn't have much to do with you happening to you. So yeah, I don't know. That's been my journey so far. It's very recent, so who knows, if I did this episode tomorrow, maybe I would feel completely different about the situation. I doubt it though.
Maybe we're having an update if something changes.
Maybe that'll happen. But so far, shocked, a lot of shocked early on, but trying to take it for the opportunity that it is, and trying to make the most of it.
Yeah. So it's layoff adjacent. Remember in one of the episodes when I mentioned when I was trying to leave Newfoundland and I wanted to work remote.
Yeah.
And I was told I could not.
Yeah.
There were a couple of people who worked remote at the company, and I was pretty much forced to resign before I left.
Yeah.
That felt hurtful to me.
Yeah.
To me, it felt like, it felt like, I wasn't good enough. That's why they could not make an exception. Mm-hmm. But, one thing I'm thankful that I did at the time was I didn't let it cool me off. I use that as a way. I use that as a way to get going. Use the energy to just apply for jobs like crazy, and my salary was doubled like within a month after that.
And in the end, probably necessary in order to live out here. Right?
Oh, it was the best thing that ever happened to me.
Yep.
And so that's what I'm just trying to counterbalance. Like, don't cool off too much.
Yep.
Use the energy that you get from this to do your next thing. And if your next thing is to travel the world, do it. If your next thing is to apply for a new job, do it. But the last thing you want to do is to start looking down on yourself. This has nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
This is just business, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And yeah, I'll follow up as things gonna happen. But yeah, hopefully if anybody's listening to this, whether or not they've been affected by a similar situation or they're in a position where they're worried something like that might happen, hopefully some of the things that we've said will help you be better prepared for it or to deal with it a little bit better. But yeah, I'll let you know about my personal journey as things happen and things like that.
And let us know as well. We want to learn from you as well.
Yeah.
This is we're not experts.
Yeah.
We're not gurus. We don't know it all.
We have one layoff between the two of us.
Yeah.
So who knows?
This is just a learning. We are using this as an opportunity to share what we've learned so far, to discuss things that you're probably thinking, but you haven't heard people like you talk about. Yeah. So that's what we're trying to do. We're just trying to be, I guess, relatable. That you're not everything that you think you're going through. There's probably a lot of other people going through similar things. That's why this exists. Yeah. So whatever we said right now, if you don't agree with us, please, let us know. Reach out if you have a different perspective. If you're an expert at layoffs, please let us know. If you're someone who has a company and you've laid off people, we would like to know your perspective. How does it feel like for you to have to pull that trigger?
It can't be easy for them either.
Yeah, exactly. So any thoughts you have about this, good, bad, just let us know. We'd love to know, and maybe we'll have you on and we can share it with more people in the future as well.
Let's do it. And that is our episode. We'll catch you in the next one.
Yeah, and do you like podcasts? No. Review, leave a review.
5 stars.
Let us know how we've done. We're trying to be better each time, but we're still trying to keep things relaxed and it's not that serious. But we want to be better. Tell us how we can improve, and we'll see you next time.
All feedback is welcome. Appreciate it.